I got rear-ended by a Chevy reversing at 30 mph. The driver claimed I attacked her with a tire iron. I was stunned. I am uncertain if this could strictly be classified as pro-revenge. However, I also doubted it could be termed malicious compliance. Nevertheless, it was well received, leading to suggestions that I share it here. If this was an error, please inform me, and I will take it down. Additionally, I will remain intentionally vague regarding locations and specific dates for reasons that will soon become evident. All dialogue is provided to the best of my recollection, which likely makes it sound more clever than it truly was. Isn't that always the case with memories? Context: this occurred back in the 1990s. I had recently been medically retired from the military and was attending college in Texas. My wife was established in her career while I was doing my utmost to figure out what I wanted to pursue for the rest of my life. One day, I decided to leave the campus, taking a route behind the building to avoid traffic. I was on my way to pick up my wife for lunch and ended up stopped behind another car at a stop sign. The vehicle in front of me was a brand new Chevrolet, one of their petite and stylish models. The exact model name escapes me currently, in a glossy candy apple red, driven by a striking blonde. I sat in my old pickup, listening to the radio and contemplating lunch when the Chevrolet advanced into the intersection. And then paused. I didn't think much of it, so I didn't do more than place my hand on the gear shift in preparation to move forward when suddenly, with a screech of tires, the Chevrolet zoomed back toward me. I quickly shifted into reverse, but was too late. The compact Chevrolet collided with the front of my truck at approximately 25 to 30 miles per hour. After a moment, I turned off the engine, exited the cab, and walked around to inspect the front of my truck. The good news was that I realized I wouldn't have to worry about that annoying belt squeal anymore. The bad news was that the front of my pickup was mostly wrecked. The grille was pushed back into the radiator, water was spilling onto the pavement, and the headlights were smashed. I bent down and noticed oil dripping as well. With a sigh of complete disbelief, I moved closer to the passenger side of the little red Chevrolet and its blonde driver. I was angry but not furious. I suppose I was still trying to understand what had transpired and why she had stopped mid-turn and shifted into reverse. Through the tinted window, I observed her on the phone, speaking animatedly to someone. Given all the mobile phone nonsense I had witnessed since leaving the military, it didn't surprise me to see her chatting on one. However, had I thought about it, I should have questioned who exactly she was calling. Instead, I tapped on the window, and she turned towards me with a vacant expression before shouting into the phone, loud enough to carry through the glass. "Oh my God, he's got a tire iron." Naturally, I spun around to look behind me, then the realization struck me. I turned in a slow circle and observed that there were no businesses, houses, or apartments in sight, nor was anyone walking on the sidewalks or down the streets. Moreover, the nearest traffic was several blocks away in every direction. Her car sat at the stop sign, precisely where it had been when I parked behind her. I stepped back and examined our vehicles. Yes, it appeared as though I had rear-ended her. Goodness, the little deceiver had set me up. I hurried back to my truck, thinking as quickly as possible. Any moment now, a police car was bound to arrive, alerted by the blonde, expecting to find a crazed man wielding a tire iron, and I absolutely needed to avoid being that individual. I grabbed my tire iron from behind my seat and tossed it as far as I could into a nearby field before jumping back into my truck. It was a slim chance, but the only hope I had. I ensured my truck was in reverse, fastened my seatbelt, slammed my head against the steering wheel, opened my door and heard sirens in the distance, and half collapsed out of the open door at an awkward angle. I went limp just as the police car screeched to a halt. I ignored the officer shouting at me to exit the vehicle, relying on the fact that my limp form would not provoke him to open fire. Eventually, he cautiously approached, noted my bloody nose, tugged at my eyelid. I made sure my eye was suitably rolled back, and allowed me to slump back into position. I remained limp while he checked on the blonde, who was nearly hysterical with fear regarding the supposed lunatic with the tire iron. That is, until she noticed me. I had hoped her rearview mirror was as misaligned as it appeared, or that she would be too preoccupied crafting her own narrative to pay attention to my actions. Upon seeing my limp body hanging from the driver's door of my truck, she stumbled to a halt. A second set of sirens was approaching, and the officer instructed the now mute blonde to remain in her vehicle. Moments later, someone unfastened my seatbelt and laid me on the ground. A capable set of hands checked my vitals, and soon a harsh, pungent odor filled my nostrils. I fought it for a moment and staged a convincing act of a man regaining consciousness after being knocked out. I instantly attempted to throw myself to one side and halted, half restrained and hyperactively scanning my surroundings to figure out what had transpired. The paramedic retreated when I sat up, glanced at the front end of my truck, and groaned. "What the heck did that fool do to my truck?" He instructed me to lie back down and began asking me professional questions about where I felt pain and whether I could feel my toes and other such inquiries. Periodically, I would glance back at the wreck and mumble about the fool who reversed like that and what on earth he had been smoking. A bit of frustrated commentary. The officer, who had received the blonde's account, approached and inquired whether I was willing to discuss the incident. I replied that I felt fine, just a little sore. The medic approved and assisted me to my feet. I gave the officer my license and insurance information, including my retired military ID, then sat in the front seat and, as if just recognizing it, asked what had happened to my seatbelt. He explained that it had to be cut away, and I shrugged. Just another expense for his insurance company to cover, I suppose. What was his story, officer? Why did he reverse like that? The officer looked sharply at me and asked what I meant. I recounted the events accurately while concealing the fact that I knew a woman was driving the Chevrolet and referred to her as him throughout my narration. After I finished explaining and he took notes, he asked if I had any evidence. "Evidence? What are you referring to?" I questioned him while pretending to be puzzled, then allowed my jaw to slacken slightly. "Hey, wait a moment. You're not suggesting that idiot is claiming that I caused this, are you?" He confirmed that the other driver asserted I rear-ended her, not him, and then threatened her with a tire iron. I frowned once more and informed him that I didn't even possess a tire iron, as it was stored in my garage, a few hours away. I stepped aside as he searched the cab of my truck, and caught a fortunate break when he noticed, without me pointing it out, that my truck was still in reverse. He exited my cab, looking puzzled, then instructed me to remain where I was as he approached the Chevrolet. He requested the blonde to exit her vehicle, and once she complied, leaned into the open driver's side door. After a few seconds, he stood back up and asked her to repeat her account of what had transpired. It was a remarkably tearful performance, but she nearly ruined it by appearing confused when he didn't respond. Instead, he prompted her to continue, describing everything that occurred after the accident and her actions following it. She backed off from the tire iron claims, suggesting it might have merely been a reflection in her window, but insisted that I had at least banged on her window and that I was merely pretending for their benefit. The officer glanced over at the medic, who slowly shook his head. Years of conducting search and rescue may not have done much for my physical condition, but I certainly know how an unconscious individual behaves. The officer then asked her if she attempted to flee or if she immediately cut off her engine. She responded that the engine had stalled and, regardless of any misleading statements I made, she had never tried to leave the accident scene. The officer nodded once and signaled the medic to come over. He then instructed the medic to sit in the Chevrolet and confirm that it was in reverse. I appreciate intelligent individuals. I didn't even have to suggest it. When I last saw the little blonde, she was genuinely in tears. She was also in handcuffs and being taken away, arrested for filing a false police report, some legal nonsense regarding attempting to conduct a scam, and my favorite charge, assault and battery. Once she comprehended that she had jeopardized her situation, just as she was cuffed, she began sobbing and explaining that she couldn't afford the car payments, and her only choice was to stage an accident, claiming I had been acting too and was not injured. "You've got to believe me." She wouldn't lie about that. I signed a nearly perfect account of the events at the police station, careful to never mention in my statement how my nose got injured or how I ended up unconscious and hanging out of the door. The arresting officer's report, along with the EMS notes, indicated that I appeared to have been partially ejected due to the impact or might have been attempting to exit the truck at the last moment. I have always believed that one should never sign a document containing false statements. It's the wisest choice in the long run, don't you think? Fortunately, her car insurance was adequate, and they covered the repairs for my little pickup. The damage was not as severe as it initially appeared, thank goodness. A little front-end work, a new radiator, a few other components that were dinged or dented, some cosmetic repairs to restore its exterior. The mechanic is even going to include a complete overhaul, which will fix that troublesome fan belt. I drove a loaner for the following week, courtesy of the blonde's insurance, and the irony of it will amuse you. It was a small red Chevrolet. It was a nice vehicle, and my wife and I enjoyed riding in it, but it was far too costly for someone like me to operate daily. A vehicle that nice might have tempted me into making some ill-advised decisions to cover the payments. P.S. The title is the punchline from a rather fitting joke. Extra points if you can recognize it based solely on the punchline. Edit. I just discovered that my little story of absurdity was narrated on YouTube by someone named Mr. Reddit. I suppose I have achieved some level of fame now. Story 2. After a year of struggles, my partner exploded over me calling him my boyfriend instead of husband. Is this relationship even worth saving? Face screaming in fear. We have been together for just over a year, and the situation has deteriorated significantly. When our relationship began, it was essential for him to have no stress and find ways to relax. Being with him felt effortless. His presence made me feel secure and acknowledged. He was experiencing homelessness because of family conflicts and ended up sleeping in his car about a month into our relationship, which I didn't find particularly alarming. I would use my vehicle when I visited him to spend the night since it was larger and had enough space to lay down with the seats fully reclined. I cherish the memories of that time because there were no interruptions. I would stay in my car with him a few nights a week, watching shows on my laptop and enjoying our solitude. I spent nearly half the week with him, sneaking him into my parents' house where I lived. He was allowed to stay just one night a week. I genuinely cannot recall a single unpleasant incident during those initial months. Despite his homeless status, we discovered what worked for us and made the most of it, which was more than satisfactory for me. He always made me feel joyful whenever I saw him, and I felt appreciated and attractive, particularly after an earlier, distressing relationship. Fast forward to the end of April 2024, when we both landed jobs 2,500 miles away from home and moved into employee housing to share a room. I had high hopes that this change would draw us closer due to the family issues we both faced, and we really needed to heal. We relocated to a stunning region of the country, and the mountain air was invigorating. However, everything fell apart the very day we arrived. We encountered some problems with the television we purchased, and I had a severe headache and wanted to take ibuprofen for relief, but he refused to allow it. He believes there are better ways to alleviate headaches and is opposed to my taking medication. I have experimented with natural remedies and everything in between, but ultimately, ibuprofen is the only thing that helps alleviate my pain and prevents me from suffering. My migraines can become very debilitating, and on this night, mine was escalating toward that level, yet he was angry with me for not assisting him in unpacking our space. I explained to him that all I needed was some ibuprofen, some water, and about 30 minutes to rest before I could help. In the end, I took the medication and assisted, but I had never witnessed him this furious with me before. I communicated my needs and comprehended his feelings. I understand why he was upset, but I was unable to do what I needed for several hours. Essentially, this entire move in the name of healing never materialized. We spent the summer in this beautiful location, yet I never truly got to enjoy it. There were numerous hiking trails nearby, but following work or even on our days off, he was perpetually too exhausted to engage in any activities. For context, we both struggle with mental health challenges. I believe his issues are more serious than mine. He tires easily, which I understand how to deal with. While we participated in a few activities, it was primarily because I was eager to do so. I formed many friendships there and longed for the community I had never experienced before. However, whenever they invited us to join them, he consistently declined. On a few occasions, I ventured out with one friend, and I would return home to be reprimanded over irrelevant matters. He always wanted my company, which I suspect is because I am his first girlfriend. This brings us to fall 2024, during which we had just over a month off between jobs. I informed him this was our opportunity to simply relax, just the two of us, along with his family and friends. We spent a couple of weeks with his grandparents, which was pleasant. However, the nighttime arrangements were less than ideal as we squeezed into a full-size bed. Given his tall and broad frame, it was uncomfortable. Our previous bed was equally dreadful, leading both of us to develop sleep and back issues. Thus, many of our relaxing days ended with little to no sleep, contributing to some challenging days. We then returned to where my parents lived for a week, which did not go well. I spent time with my family and friends, while he parked himself in my old room 9 out of 10 times. I felt that this was unfair since I had devoted over 2 weeks to that very same routine, only staying home once. I diverge, but that month of relaxation never truly occurred. While I found it calming 80% of the time, the 20% of his anger over trivial matters only worsened our situation. By November 2024, we relocated again, this time to a different state, and secured our own place. We signed a lease at exorbitant rental prices, and I reassured him that we could finally unwind without family or other distractions. Prior to this, I emphasized that all I needed from him to manage our living expenses was a commitment to work 30 hours a week. He agreed, and I repeatedly checked if he was comfortable with this arrangement, to which he affirmed and signed the lease. Given the summer situation where he worked solely the hours assigned to him due to the threat of homelessness, the first month and a half in our new home was challenging because he did not secure a job, as he refused to initiate contact regarding the 30 positions he had applied for. As a result, I was the sole income earner and just barely managed to scrape together enough for rent during that period. I felt incredibly stressed while he seemed fairly relaxed for about half of that time, possibly because he was not working. During his unemployment, my cat passed away, and not long before that, he had threatened to end our relationship. Following my cat's death, he began displaying a different level of anger toward me. About a month ago, a situation arose that surpassed anything I had previously encountered. He started working at the end of 2024 and referred to me as his wife to his coworkers. I was unaware of this until one day I bumped into him while working and introduced my coworker to him, saying, "This is my boyfriend." The moment we separated, he texted me in a fit of rage. He was furious that I had introduced him as my boyfriend rather than my husband. I did not learn that he had informed his coworkers that I was his wife until after this incident. I can understand his anger, but the intensity of it has been overwhelming. I had never realized he could become this enraged, which is truly frightening, leaving me feeling lost. Ever since the passing of my cat, the situation has spiraled further downward. After her death, I was consumed with grief and already stressed about our financial circumstances. We adopted a kitten a couple of weeks later to alleviate the monotony left by the absence of a cat. I had expressed a preference for an older cat, around 3 years or older, but when we visited the shelter, we ended up choosing a kitten. I told my partner that I was hesitant about getting a kitten due to the amount of care they require, likening it to handling a newborn. I insisted that he would need to take on more responsibilities if we were to adopt one and that it would be challenging. He insisted that, "This cat is special," which is why we went ahead with the decision. It went well for a week, but soon the kitten began to show typical kitten behavior, climbing on everything, and my partner quickly grew tired of caring for him. Consequently, I now find myself managing around 80% of the kitten's needs. He rarely intervenes when the kitten climbs onto inappropriate surfaces, seldom cleans the litter box, and so on. Essentially, after my cat passed away, my partner stopped participating in household tasks. I find myself having to cook for him, or else he'll subsist on cereal. Our days consist of work, and that is pretty much it. Convincing him to grocery shop when we are out of food has become a chore. Getting him to go to the laundromat so that we can have clean clothes is also a considerable task. We are currently using only about 30% of our clothing because we have fallen behind on laundry, and washing clothes here can cost around $200 for everything we need cleaned due to the high expenses. Whenever I do manage to get groceries or do laundry, he insists I hurry and only procure what is absolutely necessary. He becomes upset if I return home with more groceries than I initially indicated I would purchase, but the reality is that we desperately need more food. He never prepares meals or tidies up. Instead, He occupies himself with playing games on his phone or watching YouTube all day. To say that things have reached a breaking point is an understatement. Every time I attempt to communicate, I somehow say the wrong thing, which results in him becoming furious. If I accidentally place my shoes in front of his, it provokes his ire. I acknowledge that some of my habits can be bothersome, but they are not inherently wrong. He insists that I am always in the wrong, belittles me, and it has reached a point where I can no longer endure it. I am aware that I am not perfect and that I have shortcomings, which I strive to address daily. My communication skills have deteriorated. I used to be quite competent, but now it has regressed. The primary reason for my struggle is that I have no clue what will trigger his anger. It has become a guessing game. I have told him that I am unclear about the reasons for his constant anger and that we need to address this issue. His response is to blame it all on me, claiming that I can do nothing correctly and that he cannot find peace with me around because I am a failure. I insisted that we need to work on both communication and his anger, which would significantly improve our relationship. However, he attributes all of his anger solely to me. While I recognize that I need to improve my communication, it is difficult to have that dialogue with someone who refuses to see my perspective. He is sad, mad, angry, and stressed, and while I want to provide support, everything I attempt backfires. I feel completely exhausted from the demands of work and home life. I want to mend our relationship, but it appears that he becomes more irate by the day. With only 2 months remaining on our lease, I am contemplating leaving for somewhere more affordable where I can save money. However, I am uncertain. His minimal contributions toward rent make it difficult, and while I do not wish to dismiss his mental health struggles, I feel I have my own, and the situation must change to prevent my own emotional breakdown. Any advice or guidance would be greatly appreciated. I feel utterly lost and have no idea what actions to take. Story 3. After years as best friends and roommates, I set strict boundaries to regain control of my life, realizing her obsession was draining me. I am 22, and she, F22, became friends near the conclusion of our freshman year in college, with our interactions mainly revolving around having lunch and enjoying boba. Now that we are in our senior year, our situation has become complicated following a period of being close neighbors, having shared a tiny 250-square-foot double room as roommates for a year, and currently living as next-door neighbors in the same suite. She is a genuinely caring individual, perhaps too caring, regarding me. Over the years, we have confided in each other so extensively that I now feel significant regret about some of the details I disclosed. Additionally, I experience shame from the knowledge I have about her. During our junior year, when we shared a room, our late-night conversations occasionally lasted for up to 8 hours, often ending at 6, 7, or even 8 in the morning, just talking about everything. When we agreed to become roommates, primarily out of necessity due to a lack of single rooms, I genuinely believed everything would be smooth since I felt a real connection with her. As a gay man, and after having deep discussions with her about her asexuality, she had never developed feelings for anyone before I did not suspect there were any hidden emotions affecting our friendship. Around November 2023, midway through our junior year, I confronted her regarding a comment she had made a few weeks back, implying, "I have some understanding of what unrequited love feels like." I knew she was speaking about me. She confessed that she had harbored a crush on me for several months and had worked to eliminate those feelings the prior summer, claiming they were gone. We attempted to move past it, but I felt betrayed knowing that she had a crush and still chose to share a room with me. Months later, she admitted to a mutual friend who only informed me out of a sense of ethical duty that she had observed me becoming more muscular and still felt attraction towards me, her own gay roommate. I approached my friend again, pleading for the complete truth. She denied it, and I expressed my disbelief, indicating that rebuilding trust would take time. I tried to establish boundaries between us, which included requesting that she refrain from constantly tracking my location. She insisted that the Find My Friends feature was necessary to know when I would be in our living space. Stop texting me every single thought she had, and cease her jealousy when I made plans that did not include her, among other things. She would call me out for valid points I occasionally forgot about plans or did not respect her time. I apologized for those instances but explained that our shared living situation and constant interactions made it overwhelming. I felt inundated by her kindness, as she often did things for me such as buying me gifts and food, insisting she needed nothing in return, yet I felt an immense guilt for all her support, especially knowing I was struggling financially and emotionally. This is where codependency became evident. I was in therapy through this period. My therapist repeatedly advised me to reassess the boundaries in our friendship, but they would loosen as I became consumed by guilt. My friend and I spent countless hours discussing mental health and the dynamics of our friendship, which turned into an immense burden that overshadowed our lives. In December 2023, when I expressed my depression and lack of functionality, she admitted she appreciated seeing me that way because it meant more time together in our room. I burst into tears upon hearing that. It essentially indicated that she did not want me to be independent. Additionally, she continually presented me with anxieties about the possibility of our friendship ending. She compelled me to promise this connection would last indefinitely, and I complied. Occasionally, when we were in a shared space, she would speak to me for 3 continuous hours, leaving me feeling trapped. Only now am I communicating boundaries such as, "I'm tired and going to bed." Nonetheless, I still experience substantial guilt. I was, and continue to battle, my own issues with depression and anxiety, and her constant insecurities and breakdowns within our shared space made my condition worse. By April 2024, we essentially went no contact. I requested that when we were together in the shared space, we limit our conversations to essential topics only. She should refrain from texting me unless absolutely necessary, and we would socialize together only if invited by a mutual friend. This was challenging for her, but liberating for me, as it gave me a sense of control over my life. However, she began creeping back into my life, participating in an organization that I was exclusively involved in, despite her prior minimal interest. Suddenly, she was attending all the events associated with this organization, re-establishing her presence in my life. Towards the semester's end, I planned a trip to my hometown with one of our mutual friends, another trip she had already attended the prior year, and genuinely did not want her to join, particularly given the boundaries I had set. Acknowledging my guilt, I invited her despite feeling conflicted. My guilt stemmed from the expectations she placed upon me. The trip itself turned out well, but both my mother and grandmother observed her obsession with me. They commented on it, with my grandmother teasingly mocking both of us. They disapprove of her because she often seems distracted, chaotic, and attempts to influence my decisions. Now, regarding her fixation on me, it is something she persistently denies. She closely monitors my actions. My cultural background is fairly niche and underrepresented, and I enjoyed sharing aspects of it with her. Suddenly, she started listening to the same artists. I introduced her to a song, and it became her favorite. I mentioned a place I wanted to visit, and it turned into her dream destination. I have a professor who supports me and genuinely cares about my well-being. Soon after I expressed that, she signed up for the basic version of that professor's class the following semester and started mentioning her conversations with her after class. I learned a new language, which sparked her interest, despite her previous lack of it. When I traveled to a new country for the first time and shared my extraordinary experiences with her, she began expressing a desire to go there for spring break. I informed her about an upcoming trip to a new city with my mother, and she posted on her Instagram story about discounted train tickets for that city, something she had never mentioned before. The aforementioned events are all recent developments. This past summer, she claimed to have undergone significant self-reflection and insisted she was no longer the same person. Being forgiving, I accepted this and attempted to rebuild our friendship, but it quickly became overwhelming again. I constantly felt emotionally drained, and group hangouts felt forced since I easily discerned her thoughts. I am contemplating transforming our planned spring break trip with a few friends into a solo journey because I can no longer cope with being around her. Last semester, I only attended a portion of a concert in which she was a featured soloist. Many of her friends attended, but I was only there for the final 10 minutes because she indicated that the timing was flexible and that I shouldn't worry. She was aware in advance that I had to coordinate everything for a party for over 60 people, a responsibility that I had taken seriously. I also had scheduled photos with another friend group unrelated to her, We have numerous performances each semester, and I generally try to support her ones where she doesn't directly involve me, but this particular event clashed with my own commitments. I had previously communicated to her that I might struggle with timing due to my mental health challenges. At the party, I congratulated her, genuinely unaware of any underlying issues, believing she knew I had tried to attend as much as possible. However, she shot me a side eye and retreated to her room to discuss me with our mutual friend. When I entered their space to confront her, she expressed her frustration. "The one thing I expected you to attend, and you miss." She went on to declare that, after the concert, which had been a tremendous success, she cried with two friends who had traveled from out of state to support her. I felt an overwhelming mix of anger, guilt, and sadness, ultimately breaking down in front of her and our friend, sobbing for hours. This experience proved difficult for me. I missed the end-of-year gathering that I had helped plan because I felt compelled to address the nature of our friendship with her for 8 hours, concluding that this recent episode partially stemmed from a larger issue. I told her that her concern was solely directed at our friendship rather than me as an individual. Apparently, my words resonated with her, and I hoped she would comprehend and that our relationship would improve. However, her impatience and frustration have escalated. I found self-respect during my month away from her, allowing me to reflect. I established boundaries, and I am now open about my feelings towards her. I communicated that her anger unsettled me. A few weeks ago, she screamed at a security guard who denied us access to a library at night, and this loud outburst made me uncomfortable. I explained to her how this affected me, and I prompted her to consider whether she had issues with anger, which she acknowledged. Presently, I am in therapy, and she is too, and am about to start psychiatric medication in hopes of regaining functionality. Yet, I increasingly question the role this friendship plays in my life at this moment. She understands me better than anyone and knows more about me than anyone else. I have never been through so much emotionally with someone. I genuinely enjoy our conversations because we can exchange thoughts for hours without losing momentum, sharing our most candid thoughts and enjoying moments of unrestrained happiness. However, our interaction becomes a distraction and overwhelms me given our shared history, often feeling more like a long-term partnership than a friendship. When I distance myself from her, I feel more like my true self and can concentrate on my personal objectives more effectively. I am now more adept at asserting boundaries, so if I genuinely do not desire to be around her at this time and feel she is hindering my progress, should I continue this friendship? Is it even worth trying to mend? What would you label a friendship like this? Have any of you experienced something comparable? Thank you for taking the time to read all of this. I truly appreciate it. Story 4. I discovered my new job was paying me only $8.10 instead of $13. I went viral calling them out, got my $700 back in 6 days. OMG. The story took place a few years back in 2015. I never really considered sharing this here until now, but I believe it is relevant. It ended up being a lengthy narrative, and the lead-up takes significantly longer than the actual act of revenge, so there is a brief summary at the end. This account contains some strong language. The setup. I worked as a screen printer and accepted a new position at a different shop for $13 per hour. It was a slightly better wage than my previous job, and the environment was much more pleasant. For the sake of this story, we will refer to it as Waldron Sports Center Apparel. They operated from a sizable location in a local mall, which included a sports and novelty apparel shop, a multifunctional gym, and a single automatic press in the back for their printing needs. Two brothers, whom I will refer to as Jake and Jarrett, owned the business. Jake handled most of the on-site management due to Jarrett being occupied with other ventures. They were operating a pristine M&R Diamondback press, and the shop was extremely well organized. It was temperature-controlled, in contrast to my previous workspace, which was just a basic warehouse without heating or air conditioning that often exceeded 100 degrees F. The work schedule was ideal, and paychecks were directly deposited every Friday, which was another major advantage. Naturally, I was thrilled. The first 2 weeks went wonderfully. On the second Friday, I received my initial paycheck. It appeared to be short, but since I had started in the middle of the pay period on irregular hours, I dismissed it. A week later, my next paycheck was notably larger, but it seemed incorrect. I approached Jake to request my pay stubs. He informed me that all payroll matters were managed by an external company, but Jarrett should have received my login information by then. He advised me that Jarrett would return on Monday. I inquired with the other printer on staff about whether it was typical not to have immediate access to pay stubs, and while he said it was not common practice, he vouched for the brothers, claiming they probably simply forgot. The first thing I did on Monday was approach Jarrett to ask about the pay stubs, and he responded by saying that it was actually Jake's job to ensure I received the information I needed. Confused, I returned to Jake and asked him about it. He assured me he would contact the company and retrieve my login information as soon as possible. Feeling suspicious, yet lacking many options since I was already almost a month removed from my previous employment, I continued with my work. A bit later, he came back with my login credentials. After finishing the job, we took a brief break. I logged in to check my pay stubs, and to my shock, I discovered that these individuals were paying me $8.10 an hour instead of the promised $13. I was furious. Clearly, I needed to confront Jake about this. Though I had never faced this kind of situation before, I felt confident I knew what was happening. I quickly searched the laws regarding conversation recording and saw that Ohio is a one-party consent state, meaning as long as I am part of the conversation, my recording is legal and may be used in court. I set my phone to record, placed it in my pocket, and went to confront him. "Hey, I reviewed my pay stubs, and it shows you are only paying me $8.10 an hour. Can you explain what is happening here?" He looked genuinely taken aback and shook his head, saying, "It's supposed to be $13 an hour. Well, you've been paying me $8.10, and you owe me over $400. Well, that's not supposed to happen. I will contact them and find out what's going on." I returned to the shop, stopped the recording, and began setting up for the next job to pass the time. I held on to the hope that this was merely a misunderstanding, but I had my doubts. Regardless, I needed to act professionally while I sought resolution. Jake entered and said, "We will have your pay corrected on your next paycheck." I asked, "Will this include back pay?" Jake responded, "Yes, it will be included in the check." Reluctantly, I waited for the following week. On Friday morning, I checked my bank account and, unsurprisingly, found another minimum wage paycheck along with more unpaid dues amounting to several $100s. Consequently, I decided to stay home that day. 15 minutes after my scheduled arrival time, I received a text message. "Jake, hey, this is Jake, what's going on?" "Me, you sent me another minimum wage check. You owe me $700. I won't be coming in until you pay me the money you owe." "Jake, well, I was planning to write a check for the difference, but I will consider it a no-call, no-show, thanks." "Me, that is not how this works. You still owe me $700, and now I have this text admitting it." There was no further response. So I did what any millennial would do. I left a negative review on their page and started commenting on every one of their posts, which were quickly deleted. I then received a text from Jake, "You will be hearing from my lawyer. Is your mother's address still correct?" I had never shared any personal details about my family or living situation, and this individual was making assumptions while literally stealing my rent money. Me, sure, have them call me. They better have my check ready. The revenge I had the guy cornered. I had clear evidence of his wrongdoing through written and recorded proof. Now, I just had to decide my next move. I reached out to a reporter known for investigating scams like this, and he informed me that, without a signed employment contract, my options were limited. He suggested small claims court, but he warned it probably would not yield a favorable outcome, and he expressed regret for not being able to assist me further. Out of curiosity, I searched both Jarrett and Jake Walden on the local court clerk's website and discovered that Jake had been sued multiple times for similar issues, losing on 2 occasions. Then, inspiration struck me. I'm in a band and have previously paid to promote concert posts on Facebook. It was relatively inexpensive and yielded some beneficial results at that time. I composed a Craigslist post outlining my experience and included links to both Jake's and the company's court records as key content. I created a Facebook page titled "Former Employee" and posted a single message: "Avoid Waldron Sports Center apparel. Dishonest employer." I then promoted the post, allocating $15 for ads over a span of 10 days, specifically targeting individuals who like their page, local sports teams, screen printing, or the mall, all within a few miles of their shop. Within a couple of days, the post had been shared over 2,000 times. 4 days later, I received a message from him pleading with me to remove it, and 2 days after that, I received a check for every penny owed. I went to the bank to cash it and shared the story with the 2 cashiers at the counter. We laughed together because both of them had seen the post that morning. I sent him a message stating, "I have received the payment. Next time, do not attempt to scam someone who is much smarter than you." That felt great. I continued to share my experience whenever the topic was relevant in public forums. A few months later, Jake messaged me again, saying, "We already compensated you. Please stop." I replied, "I gave you numerous chances to do the right thing, but you chose to be unscrupulous. You should not have acted that way. Goodbye." That felt even more satisfying. TLDR, a screen printing shop skimmed hundreds of dollars from my paychecks. I sponsored an online advertisement against them that successfully targeted their specific clientele and went viral locally. I received my payment 6 days later.